Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's Learning Bite. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Josie Barnett, the North American Foundation Manager, and I'm so excited to introduce one of the Foundation's large initiatives in partnership with leading cities, QBE Accelicity. And this is a global competition designed to source startups whose businesses help cities to become more resilient. As we're all experiencing today and in recent events that are impacting us all, urban areas face enormous risks. Examples of these risks are public health emergencies, natural disasters, economic shifts or changes in demographics or density. And it's increasingly important for cities to be able to mitigate risk around these challenges, as well as rebound and recover afterwards. So in response, we've partnered with leading cities to create QBE Accelicity, with the goal of sourcing, funding, and connecting solutions-focused innovation to cities. The top applicants will be able to participate in Leading Cities Accelerator Program and Bootcamp, and winners will receive a combined total of $125,000 in prize money to help them move their businesses forward. Here today, we have a really great panel to introduce you to the topic of urban resilience and familiarize you with some of the innovative solutions that are out there. Moderating the panel is the chair of our North American board, Truett Tate. I'm sure many of you have met Truett in the past, and he's been a really great advocate of the Foundation's work, as well as supporting sustainability and impact investing both internally at QBE as well as externally, helping us to push our work and brand forward. Joining us on the panel, we have Mike Lake, who's the CEO of Leading Cities and our partner in this competition. And we're incredibly lucky to have partnered with Leading Cities, whose day-to-day focus is all about creating smarter, more resilient urban environments by bridging innovation in cities. Kwaku Owusu is the CEO of DrugView, and if you participated in last year's challenge, you would know that DrugView were the winners of the $75,000. DrugView is a platform that ensures better representation of diverse populations in clinical research by compiling user-generated and electronic medical data to better serve them. And finally on the panel, we also have Nathan Paul, who's the CEO of Black Sands. Black Sands is a cybersecurity startup designed to broker point-to-point encrypted connections without touching customer data, providing digital security and connectivity anytime and anywhere. So thank you to all of the panelists for joining us, and I'm going to hand over to Truett to lead the conversation.
Great, well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. Terrific introduction, as usual, Josie. I must say I share in what you said. I'm excited, and I'm impressed by the turnout. It's a lovely, at least out here on Long Island, a beautiful sunny afternoon. So I'd like to thank all of you for carving out the time. I think that this count speaks to your interest and your engagement, and I guess to your level of concern. It's part of why I like this place so much. It's the DNA, as we say, right? So let's get the show on the road. The word, resilience, urban resilience. I think when I first heard that phrase a few years ago, I thought it sounded a little bit of hype, a little bit of PR. I mean, come on, right? Our modern cities are made of iron girders and concrete. You know, the power plants and subway stations will be here forever. Certainly when all of this goes to, what was it, Planet of the Apes. But then I became slowly but surely more educated. And I think all of us did. You know, last year's QBE Challenge introduced all of us to just scores of wonderful entrepreneurs, young and old, representative of every race and culture, all coming up with these wild and crazy ideas, right? There were ways to turn rooftops into farms and making construction materials out of waste products, saving lives and property through predicting disasters' path and getting food efficiently to those who needed it most and probably could afford it least. It was a terrific part in my own evolution of awareness. You know, one of my favorite hymns, and I promise you I'm not going to start singing, but I used to love "Open My Eyes, Lord, Help Me to See." And my eyes, they're being opened. what seemed like a clever turn of phrase back then is gaining real substance. And I don't know, importantly, what seemed at worst to be a problem to be solved over time has suddenly become urgent. Nathan Paul, and I'm trying to think which direction you are from me here, Nathan, for the viewer, but you're going to hear from him in a moment, but it was fascinating. He used a phrase when we met on Monday, and it was just a part of his speech. He said, what was a dream is becoming a necessity. You know, this COVID-19 pandemic has turned our lives upside down. I mean, nearly 3 million people filed for unemployment last week alone. I think that pushed the 2-month total to something like 36 million people. 100,000 plus Americans have died from it. 300,000 have died globally, really in just a couple of months. Our city streets they're empty, and neighborhood shops are closed and abandoned. You know, suddenly urban resilience has a real meaning and a real urgency. This challenge of ours, I don't know, it couldn't have been launched at a more appropriate time. There are answers out there. Fresh minds without some of the limits of my generation. Fresh minds that are powered by new technologies and unbridled hope, thank God, and boundless imagination. They can resolve these problems and the ones that most assuredly will come after. We need to fuel those minds. We need to provide encouragement and finances and resources. You know, that's the challenge and the excitement that's brought us together here today. So I think we're really, really fortunate to have these panelists to share their ideas and their insights with us. And so I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to go, Michael, let me start with you and leading cities. I'd ask you to maybe take a step back and talk about the group's original vision and how today's crisis has shaped that vision perhaps differently than you might have ever imagined, or not. So over to you, Michael.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Truett. And I want to just take a moment to thank you and Josie for your leadership in this. It has been a real honor and pleasure to partner with QBE to bring the QBE Accelicity Resilience Challenge to the world. And as you said, it could not have come at a better time. But the truth is, QBE has been ahead of the curve, and I'm sure that does not surprise any of you. When you launched the challenge last year, you were ahead of the curve. Doing it again this year, you were ahead of the curve. And Truett, as you so eloquently just put it, I mean, this has become this opportunity to make our cities better places to live, work, play, to make them more resilient, has, as you and Nathan have said, has changed this from a hope or a dream to an absolute necessity. And Leading Cities, we are a global nonprofit organization, and we have been around at this for 12 years now. We're one of the early pioneers in kind of the smart cities industry. And the whole industry has changed over the last decade plus. But as you know, as I travel around the world and talk to different audiences, one of the things I will often repeat is the fact that although the term smart cities is a fairly new term, it's kind of coined by IBM about 15 or so years ago. Although it's a kind of a new catchphrase, the reality is the concept that underlies it is as old as cities themselves. I mean, when you think back to, for instance, the Romans building aqueducts to bring water into their cities, or later paving roads with stones and eventually, as we all know now, asphalt, putting in street lights and traffic lights, those were all smart city solutions of their time. So really the term smart cities is, what I think of it, is really referring to city evolution. And as the phrase is often used, a necessity is the mother of all invention, right? And so this pandemic that we are all being exposed to and challenged in many ways has brought all of us closer to that necessity. It has made it a very real and tangible reality in all of our lives and our families' lives. And the original vision for the QBE Accelicity Resilience Challenge, actually, I don't think has changed very much. It was always about building a more resilient community. I think what has changed is the world's response to the term resiliency, or urban resiliency more specifically. And I mean, from all the work that I've done over the last decade or so, when you would say resiliency in the urban context, what was most often conjured was the idea of climate change and sea level rise. And I think what this pandemic has showed us is that resiliency is much more than just those things. Those things are real, and we do have to deal with them. But there is a cost for cities not to evolve. And there is a perceived risk within cities that, and I'm going to break this down in oversimplified way, but I mean, a lot of city employees are scared, frankly, or fear innovating, because they will never lose their job for doing things the way they've been done for the last 50 or 100 years. But to do something different and risk the fact that it might go wrong could terminate your position with the city. And so there is a hesitation, that fear of change. And the reality is, for many decades, cities haven't had to innovate. They probably, this is a little crass to say, but they got fat, dumb, and happy, and they were able to get away with it. But this pandemic has changed all of that. I mean, now when you say resiliency, you're thinking about resiliency in its most simple form. I mean, it's about shelter. It's about getting access to food. It's about, as we'll hear from DrugView, getting access to quality healthcare. These are some of the basic building blocks of a society. And I mean, brings us right back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're right back at the beginning. And we've realized what we thought was the peak of that pyramid, this idea of urban resiliency as a dream, is, as Nathan and Truett have said, it is the base. It is the necessity. We have to build a stronger foundation than we have already. And the QBE Accelicity Resilience Challenge does just that. It not only supports the startups through the program, and I'm excited for you to hear from both Kwaku and Nathan about their experiences, but what it also does is help cities. It helps reduce that perceived risk that they have. It globally sources solutions, which is something cities are not equipped to do. It vets them using global experts in the field, building a higher level of confidence for cities to move forward. So the work that the QBE Accelicity Resilience Challenge does is paramount to the future success of cities. And building that confidence within cities is a necessary first step. So I'm grateful. I don't want to take too much time here. I'm just grateful for the leadership and vision that QBE has had on this front. We are honored to partner with you to do this. I do hope that many of you who, as Truett said, have already identified yourself as being interested in this topic, that have joined us today, will participate in this. We are designing opportunities for you to do so throughout. And I will just say one last thing. We launched on Monday, and we have already had almost 180, I think it's 86 applications already started, more than 20 already completed. So it's off to a fantastic start, and we're very excited about moving forward.
That's fantastic, Michael. Thank you. It's let me share a little bit with the audience. We got together this group on Monday to get to know each other a bit more. I remember Michael well from last year, and same with Kwaku. But sure enough, just like Jimmy Fallon in The Tonight Show, all of a sudden a child pops into the screen. In this case, Michael's lovely child. And it was very, very cute. But interestingly, at a second level, a little deeper level, I don't know if others felt the same way, but it acted like an incredible reminder that what we're experiencing today is probably changing the world for our children in a way that's quite extraordinary, quite profound. You know, how and where they're going to work, how they, I don't know, how they go to the movies, how they dine, how they commute, and ideally, how much they appreciate the world around us. But I digress, and yet I don't. That's at the heart of this. This is so dramatic and fundamental a change, not just for us and tomorrow, but for our children. Nathan, you and Black Sands bring an extraordinarily rich and topical edge to the table. Cybersecurity, sure, it's been in the press increasingly over the last couple of years, but how does the current crisis bring urgency and relevance like never before? And if you don't mind, tag on to that, maybe what you're hoping that this challenge might generate in your particular area that might be catalytic.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to be here, Truett and Josie and Mike. We had a chance to be a part of Accelicity this last year, which, like you, Truett, I was blown away by the number of incredible technologies and problems that people were trying to solve from all around the world. It was truly amazing. And what I'm looking at today with this, and we talked about this a little bit before with the current, the pandemic and everything that's around that, is it's moving everything in the smart city realm from kind of that wishful thinking, these little projects that are on the side there, to now everyone is thinking about these are critical continuity of operations issues that we have to deal with. We work with a lot of very large integrators and companies that are doing consulting, and they're looking at between 30 and 60% budget shortfalls in most cities just right away. I mean, just massive, massive shortfalls. I know the city of San Francisco was running around a $420 million deficit prior to this, and now they're projecting $2 billion over the next couple of years. So I mean, this is not just I'm going to cut and pull back. It's complete hiring freezes. It's getting down to critical infrastructure and services. It's how do I move in a new world where even you have, as you mentioned last time, Truett, leaving from the cities. Twitter just announced they're not even going to have any of their employees report back anymore. And I've been, they're huge buildings in San Francisco now are going to be empty, and they're going to sell them to, I don't know what, right? And so this means a massive immediate shift. And the shift that I see with that is, before with a lot of the smart cities technologies, there was no pressure to do anything right away. So a lot of the cities, like Michael was saying, they like to talk about it, but to risk trying something, there was no reason for me to risk trying something new. So it was hard to get them to kind of pull the trigger and move ahead. It's completely changed now. They have a pullback that's happening in terms of the number of employees. I mean, you're going to see that happening. So then how do I still offer the services needed with fewer people? You're going to have to digitize. You're going to have to automate systems. There's going to be integration. There's going to be outsourcing to other organizations. All of that increases the number of connections. And this is where we play in kind of the cybersecurity or the tech connectivity space, is that every time I have a new connection coming into these spaces, typically there are 10 to 15 different applications and systems that need to be modified. And it used to be in most enterprises a 2 to 3 month project with full team and budget. Now that's expanding to upwards of 12, 16, 18 months of work. You can't do that when you have an exponential growth in these connections. And with that, we're seeing this huge uptick in the number of attacks that are happening. So since COVID started, there's been almost a 238% increase in cyber attacks against the banking systems. And this coincides with all of this kind of remote access and these different things that are being connected, whether it's IoT or contractors or MSSPs and those that are coming in. Instead of having one place that I have to secure, now it's distributed everywhere. And it's much easier because your threat vector is spread out so far for the bad guys to find ways in. So it's really increased the requirements for cybersecurity, connectivity. It's got to be, whatever you're providing has to be simple and scalable and secure right out of the bat, right out of the gates there. Because if you don't, you're doomed and then to face, whatever's coming down. And they're projecting significant, we're already seeing them, attacks that on top of this crisis could be just devastating for different cities.
Interesting, Nathan, and you are reflecting and sharing with our audience a little of our discussion on Monday. To share that with them, because there's an element here that I thought was powerful. I had earlier on Monday been speaking to a CEO of a firm that has thousands of people in New York City, and that CEO acknowledged to me that they had just had a board meeting and they don't expect that 50% of those staff members will ever be back in New York, in Manhattan. And I guess the element that almost is pause and take that in, often when we have crises, and we've had them over the decades, we get back on our feet and a year later, life's the same as it was. I think most people recognize that there are catalysts here that will change and things won't go back. Tens of thousands of people not going back to work in New York City will change New York City, will change Chicago and LA and San Francisco and Boston and so many other ways. This isn't going to go back to normal. The phrase, the new normal, I think is absolutely right and is indeed prescient. So thank you for that, Nathan. Let me cut over to you, Kwaku. I've been really excited to get to, particularly in light of your having been last year's winner. I know that there are a whole host of players behind that victory, and I've always been impressed with how wonderful you've been in sharing that glory. But before I fire my question to you as a panelist, I know that many in the audience would love a quick update on how winning the challenge changed things for you and the company, how the company has progressed in the past year. Could you take a moment for that? And then I'll pose you a question as a panelist.
Yes, Truett and Josie, thank you so much for bringing me back, and I appreciate being here. So a lot has happened since we won the QBE challenge. So we founded our company in the spring of 2019. So we were relatively young when we won QBE. And really, winning it was a great signal to investors, to users, to the press, and to customers. So when we, since winning in October, we have raised $600,000 from investors like Jumpstart, Stanford University, and a bunch of physicians read about what we were doing, and they contacted us, and they serve as angel investors and advisors to DrugView. We have customers like Verily, which is Google's healthcare arm. We're working with Duke University. We're working with the Kidney Cancer Association of America to diversify research and improve health outcomes. We have grown our data set on diverse health outcomes to 65,000 plus now, and we've been featured in a lot of publications. So like I said, winning the contest, especially because we were so young, it was such a positive signal for us that it has helped catalyst, it has helped propel our business to where it is today.
That's terrific to hear, Kwaku. It really is. It's motivational and hopefully inspires some folks who hear that to think about what the impact of this year's challenge could be. Now, maybe
exactly. And there's we have an announcement that we've not made. We'll be making a major investor announcement in the next coming months, so stay tuned. So this has been really helpful for us.
Terrific. Now, as a reminder for the audience, thinking about the core purpose of DrugView, this is a company that focuses on the fact that for decades, indeed, probably forever, clinical tests or whatever their equivalent might have been 50 years or 100 years ago have consistently failed to provide representative testing and feedback from communities of color. And boom, here we are in the middle of a pandemic where talk of a broad variety of vaccines and antibody testings, drugs for treatment and prevention, they're all being accelerated without even the historical controls. So how much more prescient a team could be, I don't know. But Kwaku, tell us about your perspective for the future and the role that DrugView might play.
So we are optimistic about the future because the virus has really proven that we are all interconnected and our healthcare or health outcomes are intimately linked. So we are very, very optimistic, and this is unprecedented time, especially around clinical research, drug development, and healthcare in general. Prior to COVID, we were working with researchers and academic institutions to really diversify research. But in March, we started to see that our users were starting to become more apprehensive about going to hospitals for clinical research. And then by the end of the month, Eli Lilly said they were canceling every single clinical trial that they were working on. $6 billion just canceled or put on pause for the foreseeable future. So that was a bit of a challenge for us, but we've pivoted, right? So what we did was that we started to see the impact of COVID on Black and Hispanic populations much earlier than the press. And so we started to collect data on symptoms and outcomes of diverse populations that have tested positive for COVID, right? So we started to collect data around underlying conditions, severity of the infection, treatments, and outcomes. Then we were very aggressive to partner with the National Minority Development Council and other organizations to really amplify our data collection. And also, we've partnered with other organizations and served as the data collection engine behind a bunch of people or organizations that are collecting data on diverse populations or helping with antibody testing. The other things that we did was we built a COVID-19 registry. So what this does is that it brings diverse people that have tested positive for COVID-19 into the research world, right? As we're looking for a cure and things are being accelerated, it's our mission to ensure that the people that are being most negatively impacted are included in the research and included in the trials for the vaccine. And then we've done a few other things like switching our focus to virtual trials. So essentially a virtual trial is a clinical trial that takes place in the home instead of a hospital because it is not safe to send a patient that is already sick to a hospital. So we're doing a lot, but really all this is around our mission of diversifying clinical research. And today more than ever, we believe in that mission 100%. And we're doing all we can to ensure that there's a lot of diversity and representation in these vaccines. Because one of the things that I'm seeing is that if a vaccine comes out and it is not as effective for certain populations, they will lose trust, right, in the system, and they will not take the vaccine, and it can just keep the spread going and going. So we've had a bunch of little pivots, but really around serving our mission and reacting to how COVID is impacting our user populations now.
That's great. Kwaku, thanks for that drill down and that insight. And it's sobering and exciting all at the same time. So thank you. Okay, look, we live in the world of TV, of DeGeneres and Oprah. And so I've got the lightning round. Okay, a few questions that I'm going to ask each of you. And sure enough, Kwaku, I said he and the team were prescient. He read my mind on my first question. I hadn't shared this with any of the panelists, but my first question is optimistic or pessimistic? from where you stand right now, what's your view on the impact of the current pandemic and why? I want 2 minutes. I want it brisk, sharp, and of course, your nature insightful. You've spoken, Kwaku, to the point. Let me go back to you, Michael.
Sure. Well, I'm optimistic, and I appreciate the question because I think it's really it's the sad truths of reality are being exposed. Kwaku just talked about some of the inequities that have existed in our society for forever. Nathan talked about the cybersecurity pieces. I mean, before this, we know that 70% of ransomware attacks in the United States were targeting state and local governments. I can assure everyone listening today that there are likely already ransomware attacks having already been conducted, running its way through city systems as we speak, and we don't yet know about it. So that's a very pessimistic view of the current state, but my optimism comes from, from the fact that you can't solve problems that you don't know exist. And this is really exposing some of the challenges that we have had and have kind of swept under the carpet in some cases. So I'm really optimistic about the long-term impact this will have. And it's painful. It will be painful for months and maybe years to come. But I think as a society, we will emerge from this much stronger than we were before COVID-19.
I love it. Great response. And he teed you up beautifully, Nathan.
Well, always. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, no, I think I'm optimistic as well on a number of fronts. I mean, on the personal side, I've noticed this in our own lives. It's forced us to slow down. Like my kids are home. It forced us as a family and everyone to kind of reassess how you live your life. Which in the way that the world was going, it was so fast, you didn't stop to think. And so this has been like that pause button to reassess what is important. And then on the other side of things, I don't want to downplay the pain that people are facing. I think it's significant and it's probably going to be worse. But at the same time, there are reasons now why people will make change. And they will have to make some significant changes and risk trying something new. And as an innovator, and as us, the entire group, you're looking at smart cities and digital resilience and in the future, we're saying you got to risk trying something in order to ever succeed. And I think we're at a place where organizations and cities and people are willing to do that.
I agree with you 100%. And thank you for that. Kwaku, I'm going to move you on to the second question since you anticipated my first. What advice would you provide to those listeners out there who might be considering entering or otherwise simply getting more involved in the challenge? What advice?
Well, since we entered and we won last year, I'm a big proponent of this challenge. But
you'd recommend winning, right?
Yeah, I recommend winning. But there are some tactical advantages, right? The first thing is that the nature of the challenge itself forces you to reimagine your business, right? It forces you to look at every single thing in your business, and ultimately that is helpful for you. The other thing is that I know most of the companies that enter these types of challenges are startups, and they are, for the most part, looking for investment. The exposure to QBE Ventures is really, really good, right? Because you learn how to think like an investor, how to talk to an investor. And then the last thing is that the exposure to the press, right? It doesn't matter what kind of company you have. We all need eyeballs on us. And so for us, being such a young company and entering the contest, it was a great signal that yes, there's a known entity out there that believes in what we're doing. Truett, I just want to talk a little bit about the optimism or the pessimism. So sure. For me, I'm very optimistic. Like I said, we're all interconnected. It's showing that, but really, the strength of our community is really tied to the strength and resiliency of our health, right? And we won a challenge last year that was focused on urban resilience. And I'm seeing that right now, right? I live in Queens and I'm in the heart of where the epicenter of this. But every day I go out, I put my mask on, go for a jog. I see people ordering food from restaurants just to keep the restaurant afloat, right? They may not need it, but everybody's thinking we are all in this together. This is our neighborhood, and we have to ensure that these neighborhoods are still flourishing in the new normal. We see people clapping for the healthcare workers that are putting their lives on the line to battle COVID. And then for us, because we deal with, yes, because we deal with researchers, we deal with scientists, and we deal with doctors, we know intimately how hard they're working, right? All these researchers out here just really, really working hard to find a cure. So all that leaves me very hopeful that, we will come out stronger and our cities, we can become more resilient, right? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that just because of what we do and where I am personally located. So.
And it was that personal element that comes across, and I appreciate the extra comment. I'm going to go next to you, Nathan, just to scramble the order, but let me take a moment, because for all of you in the audience there, I'm not sure we highlighted as much as we should have. 3/4 of this is going to be this sort of discussion, which we're about to terminate, and we're going to go over to questions. Right now, there don't appear to be any questions. So I'm going to encourage all of you, and I'll allow Nathan and Michael to slur their words and slow down a tad. This is an opportunity for you to put your fingers on the keyboard and pop us any questions that you might have to any one of us or us collectively. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to make a comment and have it read, you can tell us whether you want that to be anonymous or not. But this is an opportunity for a little bit more direct engagement. So with that preface, Nathan, a little advice in terms of those listening and how they might engage their minds and their hearts, even if they're not necessarily submitting an application.
To be involved in a competition like this is it's an honor, first of all, and I think that's a big deal on all sides of it, because you get put into that arena with people with that kind of similar drive to go forward, and to put the time and energy into engaging not only the folks that are leading it, but the others that are in the competition with you is significant. And I think for QBE, that the idea that you would take the time and look at innovation across the board, I mean, it says a lot about the company as a whole, and where digitization and resilience and these things are playing a priority within your own organization and where you're seeing the future. And as far as I understand it, it seems that you're encouraging the organization as a whole to participate in this. And how that plays out with a large company like QBE, I'm not exactly sure, but as much as people can be touching and being involved in, like Kwaku's just a cool new company like this, a new technology, or what Black Sands is doing, it spurs on your own innovation and ideas, even if you don't have necessarily a brand new company, but you might be in a department or something where you get a chance to bring a new idea forward that might make some sort of new kind of risk reduction or productivity and improvement in the organization. It's cool.
Yeah, I like you're echoing a bit of a thought that Michael, and using the word reimagine, reinventing. I think that there are so many takeaways for each and every one of us that just talks about whether it be appreciating our blessings, being more aware of the world around us, reflecting more on how we live our lives, how we give back, appreciation. I think that reimagining is actually a really neat word, a catalytic word that we could all reflect a bit upon. Thank you for that, Nathan.
Can I just add one additional thing to this? Would be kind of a promo for Mike, because we were involved in Accelicity last year, and Michael and Accelicity have this huge network of cities all around the world, which was pretty amazing to be a part of. And we were actually blessed to win the Accelicity competition last year. But because of that, then you're touching and you're meeting these different innovators from different cultures in different places with different problems, and it really broadens the mindset within that. And so I can't encourage you enough to take advantage of Mike and his network on this. It was truly fantastic.
Terrific. I think that's a great entree. Michael, run with it.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathan. And Truett, I promise I'm going to make a point with this, and I'll try.
Be patient, though. Okay.
Yes. When I think about my grandmother and her generation, I mean, she was born just before the Roaring '20s, grew up through the Great Depression, and entered World War II. And we refer to that generation as the greatest generation. When I think of my own generation, for instance, we've lived through oil crises, housing crisis, the 2008 financial crises, certainly 9/11. And in all of that, when you think about what people have been asked to sacrifice and what the greatest generation, I mean, men were called to war, women went to work. I mean, children collected metal recyclables in their community. I mean, literally it affected everybody. I think this pandemic is having that same opportunity, and I'm going to take the optimistic side of it for my generation and others that haven't had the exposure to such crises or the opportunity to join and feel that common shared sacrifice that bonds us together. And I think that with this QBE Accelicity Resilience Challenge, the fact that it's focused on urban resilience, I think is providing people within QBE specifically with this opportunity to come together to build on those bonds that are being built as we speak. And one of the simple ways you can get engaged is by participating, whether it's attending the final pitch, which will be at the QBE headquarters in New York, or if it's judging along the way. There are opportunities for you to be engaged, and we want you to be engaged. I mean, your perspective, you do not have to be a smart city expert to feel that you're qualified to be a judge. Having your perspective based on what expertise you bring to the table is transformative to this program. And more importantly, frankly, it's transformative to the startups who are participating. So I certainly encourage everybody to build on these bonds, to sacrifice that extra few minutes to review an application here or there, and to be engaged, because the work that you're doing and the work that QBE is doing to advance these startups and the solutions that they're providing to our communities is transformational to all communities. And the money is nice. $125,000 is, as Nathan and Kwaku will tell you, is a big deal for a startup. It helps build that runway. But in the end, startups need more than just cash. And your insights help shape them. Your engagement helps motivate them. And your own passion for this helps inspire them. So you have a really important role to play. And one of the most important roles is certainly with the resilience track, city resiliency track that Josie has created. And it's an employee choice award. So the QBE employees have direct say in who will win that prize. So I really do look forward to working with all of you and encourage you to join.
I think that's great, Michael. Thank you. And Josie, I think in wrapping up, we'll talk a bit more. These things always evolve, but one of the big drivers that Josie's leadership has been a voice in the past and now too, trying to find ways to engage folks, whether it be in the judging, whether it simply be by something Nathan referred to and Michael both, putting a spotlight, awareness. Don't let us go back to how we were. And part of that is that all of you have to be adamant in your demand on everyone around you, that we learn our lessons, that we make changes, that we incorporate what we've learned into our everyday way of life. So there's lots of subtle ways as well as dramatic ways to make your contributions. So thank you for that. Okay, let's go ahead. We've got a couple of questions. I'm going to read one here that, how about this? Any perspective on the links of urban resiliency to sustainability and opportunities therein? And I'll open it to any one of you. And Josie, you too can chime in on one of these. There's no formal definition that only panelists can respond to these questions. Anyone want to take a crack at that?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. I think sustainability and resiliency are completely intertwined. I think of, when you do mix the two, I think of sustainability as a bit of a subset of resiliency. I mean, when you look at the threats that exist in terms of climate change and sea level rise, as I said earlier on, there was a time when those were the only two things people thought about when you said resilient cities. And of course, sustainability doesn't just apply to climate change, for instance. It's also about economic sustainability and providing economic mobility for the sustainability of a community. So I think these things are all very much interlocked, and I think that some of the ways that we have seen in the past that really drive cities to be more efficient in terms of the solutions that are being developed. One that comes to mind off the top of my head is, and I'm purposely trying not to talk about healthcare or cybersecurity, but I mean, something as simple as waste management and understanding not only recycling, but thinking about the waste of fuel, for instance, that trucks go around emptying empty bins in our public spaces. And so by simply adding a sensor to those bins, a collection company knows exactly when they need to go and pick up that trash. They're also able to optimize the routes, so they're using less fuel. They're also reducing the number of trucks on the street, so reducing congestion. So there's a whole number of hosts and of opportunities. And once you start getting into this, you realize how it all is connected, and that, I mean, cities are very complex organisms, so to speak, and you can't really solve one thing without it providing an opportunity to solve another. So I think resiliency and sustainability are two of the biggest global challenges that we have when it comes to cities. And I think just with our carbon emissions reduction, that alone has a global impact. And it builds resiliency within cities because, you know, you're reducing pollution, you're reducing health issues like asthma and other respiratory diseases. I mean, it just spins and spins and spins. And so I would say that although they are separate, they are so intertwined, it's hard to completely separate them.
Okay, great.
One piece to that, Truett.
Go, Nathan.
And then that has to do with the scalability piece. And I heard this right from a bunch of the CIOs and CTOs of cities. We were at an event with Harvard and Accenture and Oracle. They were sponsoring this, and they invited us to be a part of it. And without fail, every one of the leaders, the kind of the C-suite leaders and executives in the cities said, we can't just put in a one-off technology anymore, because it has to scale. It has to scale across our city. It has to scale about the future, you know, what else is coming down the pipe. And then it's got to scale across other organizations, the state and the federal and whatever else is coming in. And they're thinking about how this works, and whether it's data, the way that moves, or in our case, the way the connections move and the connectivity and the security pieces on this. They're thinking bigger and long-term on this. And that's that. In each of those sustainable, resilient pieces is how do we actually make something that is flexible across all those environments.
Great, great. Now let's do this. I'm going to turn to the next question, which I thought in particular, Kwaku, you and Nathan could chime in, because while you've got Black Sands, while you've got DrugView, both of you are involved in organizations that see many more innovations directly and indirectly related to your sweet spots. So the question came out, how can we learn more about different companies and ideas that are participating in this? It would be great to hear more about the other innovations that they're working on. Maybe just a little bit of color in terms of some of the creative and innovative things that you are seeing. Kwaku, maybe you kick off, then I'll go to Nathan.
Yeah, so for us, we were part of an organization called Techstars, which is essentially an accelerator of innovative businesses. So we get to see what is going on in pretty much in startup land. So I think for people at QBE or people at larger organizations, there are all these innovative things that are going on, or innovative companies that want to participate in something like QBE that may not be easily accessible. But when you look at organizations like, Techstars here in New York, there's the HIT Lab, which is the Columbia University tech accelerator. You get to see a lot of these healthcare, these smart city, all these technology platforms that are doing things that are really, really innovative. So for larger organizations, it may be worth people looking out a little bit and seeing what is in the broader tech ecosystem, and seeing which ones make sense to talk to and which ones does not work for the organization. So generally, that is how I look at things like this. And then also, just if you want to get to know innovative companies, you have to read some of the things that startups are reading, right? So there are publications and things of that nature that are really helpful for you to really know what is going on.
Terrific. Kwaku, thanks. Now, Nathan, I'm going to wrap with you because we've got all of 7 minutes, and we've got a couple concluding comments, including some of what Josie's going to take folks through. So, a couple of thoughts.
I would totally agree with Kwaku. We were a part of Plug and Play out of Sunnyvale and a couple of their verticals there. And many large organizations join accelerators like that. And they're bringing in new technology from around the world all the time. Accelicity was exactly that for smart cities for us. So they were bringing in technology from around the world again, and very, very innovative technology. And so it was organizations like that were one place where you could go and kind of get a feel for that. But there's a second piece of this that I would encourage, and that is, and I watch this with a lot of the enterprises that we've met in both, is that where in QBE is there a place to try out new technology, right? So this is one of the biggest challenges, is you can go and you send an innovation group over to, Techstars or to Accelicity or Plug and Play, and they come back with ideas, but you still got to have some place where you can get your people's hands on that, and to have those types of labs or those types of environments where, whether it's a cybersecurity connectivity technology like ours, or platforms for, new medical technology or drugs or whatever that is, where is that you can get people's hands on it? And then the other big one that startups are always looking for, because we don't have the luxury of the long sales cycles that the big companies do, are how rapidly can you as a big company take an idea, pilot that idea, and then get it into something in either a yes or no. And startups are okay with no's. I would much rather have a very fast no than a long drawn out maybe, right? So that becomes a big thing on that. And I don't know how QBE works with that, but that would be a huge advantage.
Super. Nathan, look, I want to just conclude before handing it to Josie to thank the three of you as a panel. I think you've been terrific. I've enjoyed getting to know you better between Monday and today. You're all articulate, you're visionaries, you're passionate, and inspiring. So I really appreciate your taking the time to share with the audience here today. Thank you to everybody who has tuned in for your time, for your engagement. Believe it or not, through the screens, the energy is palpable. So I thank you. And Josie, over to you to wrap up.
Thank you, Truett, and thank you to all the panelists for joining, and especially to all of the employees for your interest and participation, because it just shows us, that we're doing something that you are interested in, that you maybe want to participate in. And aside from looking for the innovations externally, one of the things that really excited me was tapping into the knowledge and insight, the expertise that we have inside the company, inside QBE. And to leverage that, there'll be a series of opportunities for conversations in reviewing applications. On the August 20th, we're going to do an online audience award. So if you tune in, you'll get to hear 5 pitches, digital pitches from, finalists or semi-finalists really. And you'll get to choose who wins that award. And that's $25,000 that is awarded by our QBE audience. And that person will go through to the final on October the 22nd. So you'll get all the communications around this. We hope that you'll participate in the challenge all the way through to October and maybe beyond if there are startups that fit into our business where insurance can sort of play a part and have some impact. If you want to participate, if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me. All of the questions that were not answered, I will make sure that we follow up. So I really, really appreciate everyone attending. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
So much.
You as well. Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you.